Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cryptoflifetales. Today's video, we are talking about the San Francisco Black Doodler of 1974. Now, San Francisco in 1974, at that time, it was not, should you say, it was a dangerous time for San Francisco in 1974. There were 129 murders in San Francisco in 1974. Sodomy was illegal in California until 1976. And the police in San Francisco spent a lot of time raiding gay bars and arresting homosexuals despite the city's reputation for tolerance. Now, the Black Dueler was a serial killer that targeted gay men. So it was speculated that may have been the reason the Doodler chose gay men as victims. Now, between January of 1974 and June 1975, 5 gay white men in San Francisco were killed and their bodies were found around the Ocean Beach area of the city. Now, all 5 victims had similar stab wounds, leading police to believe that their murders were connected. The murderer, again called the Doodler, he stabbed to death at least 5 gay men in San Francisco over an 18-month period in the mid-70s. It's speculated that the toll might be as high as 14. Now, the killer became known as the Doodler because when one of the assault victims met him, he was sketching characters. And police said that they believed the suspect lived in the Bay Area, but not San Francisco, and would come to the city on weekend nights. The Black Doodler got his name because of his skin color, as well as drawing caricatures and cartoons of his victims and then leaving the drawings next to their bodies after murdering them. We don't know what the drawings look like, as the police have never released the pictures. Now, a call came in just before 1:30 a.m.
I believe there might be a dead person on the beach.
The caller said, "I believe there might be a dead person on the beach across from Ulloa Street. If you follow the street right down to the water," the caller told a San Francisco police dispatcher. When the operator asked if the man wanted to give his name, he responded, "No, I don't think that's necessary. I just wanted to let someone know maybe he needs help or something, but I felt it was my duty to report it." The caller didn't give his name, just hung up. In 1975, police were able to sketch the suspect based on one of the victims' description of the man. Police described him as 19 to 25 years old at the time, black, lanky, and around 6 feet tall. In 1976, police detained a suspect who was never charged. There were 2 other potential suspects that came about in 1977 after a pair of men from Redondo Beach were arrested in Riverside County, California, and questioned on suspicion of approximately 28 murders there, similar to the San Francisco killings. Now, it was reported that in 1977, police said that they needed victim testimony to charge the suspect. There was a well-known entertainer and a diplomat that were among 3 of the survivors who did not want to come out of the closet by testifying. And it's attested to that time because around that time, people had a lot to lose if they came out of the closet. It was said that, that these people, they rather go ahead and just not even admit to being a victim than to admit to being gay. Their livelihoods were at stake, especially if, some of them had families. So, and that, again, like I said, at that time in the 70s in San Francisco, it was extremely dangerous to admit that you were a gay man. Gay men were being targeted a lot, not only by the Black Doodler, but there were some other attacks, random attacks, but it was, easy targets, just like a lot of cases you will hear about prostitutes being easy targets because people feel like uh, they're not going to report it, or people, if it is reported, the police, they don't care. So, also, police believe that the doodler was seeing a psychiatrist with the last name Priest, practicing in the East Bay area. So police were trying to locate that psychiatrist, if that's the last name. So the victims of the doodler. The first victim his name is Gerald Kavanagh. And he was very little known about him. He was born in Canada on March 2nd, 1923, and lived in San Francisco, working in a mattress factory. Now, it was stated that Gerald Kavanagh's family was a religious family, Catholic family, so his lifestyle was not accepted by the family, so to say. And so because of that, he was a loner, and he didn't have much contact with his family. So in 1974, on January 27th, a corpse was found at the water's edge on San Francisco's Ocean Beach. And there, 49-year-old Gerald Earl Kavanagh had been stabbed multiple times. His left hand had defensive wounds. His body was it showed signs of slight rigor mortis. Now, the dueler's second victim was Joseph Stevens. And Joseph was 27 years old at the time of his murder. And he was discovered, again, on June 25th of 1974 by a woman walking along Spreckles Lake in San Francisco. It was stated that he must have died like shortly before his body was found, so his body hadn't been like in the elements too long. He had been witnessed at a club the previous day. He was employed as a female personator. Today, that would be a drag queen and comedian. Officer suspected that Joseph Stevens was alive at the time he had been at Spreckles Lake. Possibly he drove himself to the area to meet the killer. Next victim is 31-year-old Klaus Christmann. He was a German national and employee of Michelin who had a wife and 2 children. He was last seen alive at Bojangles. Klaus was found on July 7th of 1974 at the foot of Lincoln Way by the beach. He was found by a woman who was walking her dog and discovered the body. Klaus' throat was slashed in 3 places, and he was stabbed at least 15 times. Now, all 3 of the victims were viciously stabbed front and back, and all 3 were stripped of identification and property, which led to taking a longer time to identify. Now, on May 12th of 1975, nearly a year since the murder of Klaus Christmann, the Doodler struck again. And this time, the victim was Frederick Elmer Capin, 32 years old. He was found by a hiker behind a sand dune between Vicente and Ulloa Streets. Frederick, medical corpsman in the Navy and the recipient of a commendation medal for saving 4 men under fire in the Vietnam War, and was living with his grandparents at the time of the murder. The coroner determined that the cause of death was stab wounds of the aorta and heart. There were marks in the sand leading to Frederick, and there was it had indicated that Frederick had been dragged about approximately 20 feet to where his body was found. Now, the last victim was 66-year-old Gerald Goldberg, who was Doodler's last and oldest victim. He was found on June 4th of 1975 on a golf course by a hiker 10 yards off the trail. His neck had been slashed, his pants were unzipped, and he wasn't wearing any underwear. And it said he was approximately dead for 2 weeks due to the decomposition of the body. Now, Harold was Swedish and a sailor by profession. According to immigration records, between June 1930 and July 1940, Harold stopped in numerous harbors, including Boston, Puerto Vita, Cuba, Shanghai, Melbourne, St. Louis Obispo, Yokohama, and Liverpool. He became a naturalized citizen on August 15th of 1955. 5 months later, the police released a composite drawing of the suspect. He was known to frequent bars and restaurants in the Upper Market and Castro areas. He was black, between 19 and 22 years old, between 5 feet 10 and 6 feet tall, slim, and frequently wore a Navy-type watch cap. Now, police believe the killer had a quiet, serious personality with an upper middle class education and above average intelligence. Quite possibly, he was an art student. One of the witnesses said that he was, based on what a witness had said, they believe that the Doodler studied commercial art. The police also believe the suspect had a history of mental difficulties involving sex. They thought that too, that maybe he had some sexual identification problems and was undergoing psychiatric care on an outpatient basis. I guess one of the victims, this suspect had told them that they were seeing a psychiatrist on an outpatient basis, and had told the victim that all you guys are alike. And it's suspected that he probably meant that they were gay. Apparently, a psychiatrist in the area thought they may have treated the Doodler. It is believed that the psychiatrist told investigators that the suspect admitted during one session that he had committed the brutal slayings. This case was because of the time period and the mindset regarding gay men. The case just wasn't handled the way it should have been handled, and so a lot of information wasn't documented the way it should have been documented. There were 3 surviving witnesses. One was a European diplomat assigned to the United States who in May of 1975 met the suspect in an upper market restaurant where he was having a midnight snack. The suspect asked if the diplomat had any cocaine, and they went back to the diplomat's apartment where the suspect stabbed him 6 times. The diplomat denied he had sexual relations with the suspect, But if you're doing drugs and they went back to your apartment, more than likely the diplomat did have sex. It was just that he probably was embarrassed to tell the detectives that due to the mindset at that time. Now, another surviving witness was an entertainer of some kind who, according to police, was nationally known and was described as a well-known San Francisco figure. Now, this person left the city and reportedly wouldn't answer any letters or phone calls. Probably just really scared that they would be exposed. And it doesn't really say exactly what happened to this person, how they were attacked or anything in regards to the encounter, which is very troublesome, especially when you're trying to figure out who this person is. Definitely, I don't know if police may have the information, but because the person don't want to come out, they're not listing it publicly. So I can't say for certain. They refused to testify publicly because it would require them again to admit they were homosexuals. Another surviving victim provided a sketch of the suspect, who was described to be African American and between the ages of 19 to 25. Now, it was said that there was at least a dozen suspects, and at least one of them they thought may have committed the murders. In July of 1977, the police had a suspect in question for a whole year who had spoken freely with police and declined to confess to the killings. And a week later, he said, thanks to an anonymous tip, the license plate number of the suspect car, they got a license plate number, but nothing came of that. It is believed that the police probably know who the Doodler is, and in fact, they've probably interviewed him multiple times. In May of 2018, the case was reopened and is ongoing. There's been some recent success using DNA technology developed decades since the crimes have been committed, and it's led police to re-examine evidence in the case. In February of 2019, police offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer and released a revised sketch showing what he could look like 4 decades later. They later announced they would consider forensic genetic technology, similar to what was done with the Golden State Killer case. In 2020, it was announced that the San Francisco Chronicle will be launching a new podcast hosted by longtime Chronicle journalist Kevin Fagan. And the podcast would be a narrative podcast in regards to the case that's showing what's been going on since the crimes have committed until now in regards to investigation and information regarding the investigation, and hoping to bring some justice to the case. And I will leave that link in the description box. But I'm hoping that the police find some success in finding the killer. Recently, there's been multiple missing persons cases that have been solved because of the technology in regards to that forensic genetic genealogy that was used on the Golden State Killer as well as the Grim Sleeper cases. And there's a couple more that have been coming out, missing persons, that have used the same technology and has gotten some really great results, and some have been solved. So there's great hope that this case will be solved.